What happens when actors go off script in the Wild West? Sometimes, magic. In a genre known for grit and precision, a single improvised line or gesture can become iconic. From unscripted gunslinging to legendary quotes never written down, these spontaneous moments redefined characters and made the final cut. Saddle up as we ride through the 20 best improvised moments in Western movies and TV shows that audiences will never forget. Val Kilmer's I'm Your Huckleberry, Tombstone, 1993. Val Kilmer's portrayal of Doc Holliday is already considered one of the coolest in Western history, but his now legendary line, I'm Your Huckleberry, wasn't even in the script. The phrase was a regional slang Kilmer discovered during his personal research. He slipped it in during filming as a response to Johnny Ringo's challenge, and the director loved it so much, it stayed. The cool, casual delivery gave Holliday a layer of mysterious confidence, and the phrase became an instant classic, quoted endlessly by fans and even printed on t-shirts and gravestones. Kilmer later clarified that Huckleberry was slang for the right man for the job. It perfectly embodied the Southern gentleman-turned-killer that he played with eerie charm. What could have been a throwaway retort became the soul of his character, all because of one improvised line. Few unscripted moments have defined a Western so completely. Clint Eastwood's Hat Toss, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. During the final Mexican standoff scene, tension simmers with every glance and footstep. But one moment breaks the stillness. Clint Eastwood's man with no name tosses his hat to the ground before the draw. That wasn't in the script. Eastwood, deeply immersed in the moment, improvised the gesture as a non-verbal signal of readiness and defiance. Sergio Leone loved it. It added a tactile jolt to the slow-burning tension. Eastwood's silent throw humanized his mythic gunslinger, showing impatience and intention without uttering a word. The hat toss added kinetic energy to a scene built entirely on looks and pauses. For a film so defined by deliberate pacing and visual language, that one spontaneous motion became the perfect punctuation. It didn't need a line, just a flick of the wrist, and the duel was on. Robert Redford's silent cliff nod, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. The cliff-jumping scene in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is pure cinema, thrilling, funny, and revealing. But the iconic moment when Sundance hesitates and silently nods his reluctant agreement to jump wasn't planned. Redford's expression of sheer disbelief, followed by a hesitant nod, was a spur-of-the-moment decision during filming. He stayed in character, but let real human fear leak through, which added weight to the comedy. The improvisation worked because it highlighted the absurdity of the situation without words. That silent exchange between Butch and Sundance felt more authentic than any scripted dialogue could have. In a buddy western packed with charm and banter, this improvised gesture stood out as emotionally raw and weirdly relatable. We've all been in that do-or-die moment, silently freaking out, and Redford captured that truth with a glance. The director kept it in, and it became a defining part of one of cinema's greatest duos. James Arness Tripping, Gunsmoke, TV series. In one of the early episodes of Gunsmoke, Marshal Matt Dillon is seen striding purposefully across the dusty streets of Dodge City until he suddenly trips over a hitching post. It wasn't in the script. James Arness, ever the towering figure of frontier justice, stumbled mid-scene, but didn't break character. He simply adjusted and kept going as if nothing happened. The director loved the realism and decided to keep the moment in the final cut. The minor trip made Dillon more human, less invincible, and more grounded. In a series that ran for 2 decades, this one off-script moment became quietly iconic. Fans noticed. It gave the stoic marshal a rare touch of vulnerability. Sometimes it's the little slips, literally, that make a hero relatable. Sam Elliott's Looking at Trouble, Tombstone, 1993. In the saloon showdown, when Sam Elliott's Virgil Earp locks eyes with Ike Clanton, he calmly delivers the line, "You ever seen a man look at trouble and not care?" It wasn't in the script. Elliott, deeply in character, improvised the line on the spot. It came out naturally, gritty, authentic, and dripping with frontier cool. The filmmakers loved it and let it roll. The line added serious intimidation and defined Virgil as more than just Wyatt's brother. It showed he was his own force of reckoning. Elliot's slow, deliberate delivery gave the words extra punch, and viewers felt the heat of that moment instantly. Improvised or not, it felt like the kind of line a seasoned lawman would say before all hell breaks loose. That one sentence gave Elliot's character a lasting quote, and left fans quoting it for decades. Gene Wilder's backstory monologue, Blazing Saddles, 1974. In Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder's Jim, the Waco kid, tells the new sheriff about his past. But that heartfelt, absurd, and oddly tender monologue about being the fastest gun in the West, part of it was pure improvisation. Mel Brooks gave Wilder space to play with the scene, and Wilder delivered a mix of melancholy and ridiculousness. He added lines like, "I must have killed more men than Cecil B. DeMille," which wasn't in the script. It worked because Wilder grounded the lunacy in emotion, making the Waco kid both tragic and hilarious. His slurred delivery, dreamy pauses, and soulful glances gave the comedy real emotional weight. It was a turning point in the movie, deepening the audience's connection with a character who had mostly been a comic sidekick. The monologue elevated Blazing Saddles from spoof to satire, one improvised sentence at a time. Mel Brooks later said it was one of his favorite unscripted moments in the entire film. Lee Van Cleef's Whistling, For a Few Dollars More, 1965. Lee Van Cleef's Colonel Mortimer was the ultimate cool-headed bounty killer, but during one suspenseful duel, Van Cleef added an eerie touch. He began whistling, slow and menacing. That wasn't in the original script. Van Cleef improvised the whistle to break the silence and unsettle his opponent. Director Sergio Leone was so impressed, he not only kept the take, but asked for more whistling in other scenes. The result? A spine-chilling build-up to gunfights that made Mortimer unforgettable. Whistling became part of his persona, calm, calculating, almost mocking. It also contrasted beautifully with Ennio Morricone's sweeping score, giving the character a unique sound signature. With that one unscripted breath through his lips, Van Cleef managed to upstage even Eastwood's steely silence. The move transformed a standard standoff into a musical, psychological war, and proved that sometimes you don't need dialogue to make noise. Paul Newman's Who Are Those Guys? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. Chased relentlessly by a super posse, Paul Newman's Butch Cassidy turns to Sundance and repeatedly mutters, "Who are those guys?" The line wasn't originally emphasized in the script, but Newman started improvising it during takes, adding comic disbelief and tension. It quickly became a running gag throughout the chase scenes. Director George Roy Hill loved how it broke the intensity without undercutting the suspense, so he kept it in. That line perfectly captured Butch's increasing paranoia and curiosity. It also gave the audience a shared experience. We too were wondering how these relentless trackers kept closing in. Newman's delivery, exasperated, amused, and genuinely confused, made it one of the most quotable lines in Western cinema. In a film brimming with chemistry and wit, that improvised line helped build one of the most memorable chase sequences ever filmed. It was both funny and foreboding, and totally unplanned. Jeff Bridges' Whiskey Chuckle, True Grit, 2010. Jeff Bridges' take on Rooster Cogburn was already gruff and brilliant, but during one scene where he downs whiskey and mumbles to himself incoherently, Bridges unexpectedly let out a hearty, slurred laugh. The chuckle was unscripted, but it felt so true to the character that director Joel Cohen kept it in. It wasn't just a laugh, it was a moment that peeled back Cogburn's armor. The whiskey-fueled moment gave the viewer insight into his eccentricity, sadness, and grit. Bridges brought a raw, unfiltered energy to the role, and the laugh served as both comic relief and character study. It added layers of unpredictability to a man who could just as easily shoot you as save you. The scene became one of the quiet highlights of the movie, showing how, even in a gritty Western remake, spontaneous human behavior could say more than words. Jack Elam's Fly Chase, Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. The opening scene of Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West is almost entirely silent. Just sounds of creaking wood, dripping water, and a ticking clock. But one unforgettable moment came when actor Jack Elam, seated at the train station, let a buzzing fly land on his face and did nothing. Then, with exaggerated slowness, he brought his gun barrel up and tried to shoo it away. None of that was in the script. Elam improvised it all, playing with the fly and allowing it to crawl around his face. His expression never changed. It turned a quiet moment into an unforgettable one. Leone loved the improvisation. It added strange comedy, tension, and characterization without a single line of dialogue. That scene now lives in Western history as one of the most bizarrely brilliant openings. And it all started with a fly and an actor who knew how to sit still. Clint Eastwood's Get 3 Coffins Ready, Make That 4, A Fistful of Dollars, 1964. Clint Eastwood's nameless drifter walks into a dusty town and casually says, "Get 3 coffins ready." After killing 4 men in a matter of seconds, he mutters, "My mistake, 4." That last part? Not in the script. Eastwood improvised it during the scene, riffing off his own dry humor and calm brutality. The line turned what could have been a typical shootout into something unforgettable, icy, ironic, and unforgettable. Sergio Leone, never one to ignore a stroke of genius, left it in. The moment crystallized the character's identity. A man of few words, even fewer regrets, and lethal accuracy. It also cemented Eastwood's reputation as a master of understatement. Viewers loved the cold-blooded flair. The correction made it darkly funny, almost like a grim punchline to a joke, only the man with no name understood. In a film defined by silence and stare-downs, that improvised line cut sharper than any bullet and helped shape the mythos of the spaghetti western anti-hero. Kurt Russell, wiping Val Kilmer's mouth, Tombstone, 1993. In Tombstone, during a quiet emotional moment between Wyatt Earp and a dying Doc Holliday, Wyatt reaches out and gently wipes the sweat and saliva from Doc's mouth. It was not written. Kurt Russell improvised the gesture after seeing Val Kilmer shivering and pale from his character's tuberculosis. The move was subtle, but powerful. It humanized both men and showed their deep unspoken bond. Director George P. Cosmatos recognized the weight of the moment and left it in. Russell's instinct turned a simple hospital scene into one of the most touching moments in the film. Fans often cite it as the emotional peak of Tombstone, proof that the film wasn't just about gunslinging and bravado, but about loyalty, mortality, and friendship. The gesture felt deeply personal, like something one real friend would do for another in his final hours. And it wasn't planned. Just one actor responding to another, with care, tenderness, and truth. Timothy Oliphant's You Tell Me, Deadwood, TV series, 2004 to 2006. Deadwood was known for its Shakespearean grit and razor-sharp dialogue, but sometimes the best lines weren't written at all. In one tense exchange, Timothy Oliphant's character, Seth Bullock, is asked a loaded question about justice. Rather than follow the script, Oliphant paused, narrowed his eyes, and simply said, "You tell me." The room fell silent. That improvised response carried the weight of Bullock's moral ambiguity, frustration, and rage, all in 3 words. Showrunner David Milch kept the take. It wasn't just the line. It was how Oliphant delivered it, as if Bullock had finally snapped under the pressure of lawlessness, violence, and personal guilt. The moment added a layer of realism and unpredictability that Deadwood thrived on. It felt like the character wasn't acting anymore. He was living, bleeding, and daring someone to push him further. Fans still point to it as one of Bullock's most powerful scenes, and it came straight from Oliphant's gut. Charles Bronson's harmonica solo. Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. Charles Bronson's character, simply called harmonica, was defined by his eerie musical motif. But did you know that the first harmonica solo in the film was completely improvised? During a rehearsal, Bronson began experimenting with different haunting tones on set. Sergio Leone, ever the stylist, was struck by how atmospheric it sounded and asked Ennio Morricone to build an entire theme around it. From then on, harmonica's eerie playing became the ghostly heartbeat of the film. The character barely speaks, but his improvisation on that harmonica says volumes about vengeance, mystery, and memory. It made Bronson's portrayal one of the most enigmatic in Western cinema. The impromptu notes didn't just make it into the final cut, they became the spine of the character and the score. Sometimes the smallest idea, a few drawn-out notes on a prop instrument, can haunt a film forever. John Wayne's Hat Twirl, Rio Bravo, 1959. John Wayne had swagger baked into his DNA, but one of his coolest moments in Rio Bravo wasn't choreographed. During a casual scene, he's leaning back in a chair, talking to his deputies, when he suddenly flips his hat around his finger like a gunslinger might spin his revolver. It wasn't scripted, it was just Wayne being Wayne. The move was smooth, playful, and oddly disarming. Director Howard Hawks liked the bit of flair so much he kept it. It brought levity and charm to a scene that could have otherwise been flat. Fans loved it. It became one of the film's most GIF-worthy moments long before the internet existed. It said everything about Wayne's version of Western masculinity: confident, unbothered, and a little bit cocky. That hat twirl became a signature move, a spontaneous flick of the wrist that said, "I own this town." Brad Dourif's medical rant, Deadwood, TV series, 2004 to 2006. Brad Dourif's portrayal of Doc Cochran in Deadwood was raw and unsettling, but one of his most powerful moments came when he delivered an unhinged, passionate monologue during a surgery scene, completely unscripted. Dourif, known for his intense preparation, tapped into the chaos and pressure of battlefield medicine and let loose. His voice cracked, his hands trembled, and he ranted about death, failure, and the weight of saving lives with primitive tools. The crew reportedly froze in awe. Creator David Milch kept the entire scene in the final cut, calling it an explosion of truth. Dourif's improvisation revealed the tortured soul beneath the town's only doctor, making viewers see him not just as a healer, but a man haunted by every death he couldn't stop. The unscripted rant became one of the most talked about moments in the show, praised for its emotional authenticity and sheer unpredictability. Franco Neros' Mocking Bow, Django, 1966. In the gritty spaghetti western Django, Franco Nero's character exudes silent rage and sarcasm. One moment, however, broke through with flair, when Django gives a mocking bow to Major Jackson, a racist villain who just insulted him. That moment wasn't scripted. Nero improvised it, dipping low with exaggerated politeness. The action caught everyone off guard, including his co-stars, but it perfectly embodied Django's defiance. Rather than react with fists or bullets, he used mockery as a weapon, and Leone-style cool flooded the frame. The bow stayed in the film and became one of Django's defining gestures, humor amidst hate, style amidst violence. It showed that Western heroes didn't need to shoot first to strike hard. Fans of the genre still point to it as a classic example of character being revealed not through dialogue, but through an actor's instinct. One bow, no words, just power. Kevin Costner's Nervous Hat, Touch, Open Range, 2003. During the slow-burning build-up to the final gunfight in Open Range, Kevin Costner's character, Charlie Waite, nervously adjusts his hat several times. The motion, awkward, unsure, and totally human, wasn't scripted. Costner, also the film's director, improvised the gesture while staying in character. Rather than the stoic, fearless gunslinger trope, Charlie showed genuine fear. The scene gained texture and vulnerability. That single motion, hands brushing a brim, adjusting it like armor, made the moment feel real. Viewers noticed. It reminded them that Western heroes, even with six-shooters and hard eyes, could still be scared. The improvisation made Charlie more than a shooter. It made him a man who knew what it meant to take a life, and how hard it is to live with it. A tiny movement, maybe 2 seconds long, turned into an emotional anchor for the entire climax. Sam Shepard's Quiet Threat, The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, 2007. Sam Shepard's portrayal of Frank James is brief but chilling. In a dinner scene, Frank quietly stares down a suspicious guest. As tension builds, Shepard veers off script and delivers a low, slow line. "Be careful what you're thinking, son." It wasn't written, but it froze the room. Director Andrew Dominic later said it was one of the most terrifying moments in the film because it felt real, unrehearsed, primal. Shepard didn't blink. The line came from deep within the character's soul, a man always 2 steps ahead, always dangerous. The other actors, caught off guard, reacted with genuine discomfort, and the camera caught it. That improvised line gave Frank James the aura of a predator hiding behind a smile. It showed why Jesse James was feared and why Frank was quietly deadlier. One sentence, no volume, just steel. Michael Biehn's Revolver Twirl, Tombstone, 1993. In one of Tombstone's most memorable scenes, Johnny Ringo shows off his gun-spinning skills to intimidate Doc Holliday. But the scene's highlight wasn't Ringo. It was Holliday spinning a tiny tin cup in sarcastic mimicry. What's less known is that Bienh improvised the entire Revolver Twirl. It wasn't choreographed. Bienh had learned the move from his own training and decided to add it on set. The fluid, showy twirl felt natural to Ringo's cocky persona and perfectly set up the Kilmer's mocking response. The audience gets to enjoy the contrast. Ringo is deadly serious and Holliday is dangerously amused. That improvisation created one of the best tension and release moments in the film, layered with humor, threat, and style. Fans consider it the best duel of words and movement in Western cinema, and it started with a flourish Bienh thought might be too much. It turned out to be just right. Improvisation in Westerns isn't just an accident, it's an art. These spontaneous moments added humanity, humor, and unforgettable grit to already iconic scenes. Next time you watch a classic, look for the unscripted, the stumbles, the chuckles, the improvised lines. That's where the soul of the West often hides. Subscribe for more legends.